We're opening up our country.
All across America, the states are opening back up from quarantine. Too soon? Well, maybe, but God help me, I miss milkshakes in the drive-in. But let's be honest about something here. There is still a lot of fear, and because of this fear, I'm going to close out my zombie miniseries. Originally, I was going to do a video on Disney's Zombies because, believe it or not, there is a lot to say about that movie. A lot of you also asked me specifically for a video about Day of the Dead, and I do legitimately love that movie. I really do. And it would be quite poetic to do the last in this miniseries on the final in Romero's original trilogy, but I don't honestly know if I have anything to say about that brilliant work of art that hasn't already been said. I mean, maybe I'll circle back around and talk about it in the future, but for today, I'm gonna wrap us up with a film that I would be shocked if more than half of you have even heard of. That's enough preamble, I think, so let's get to talking about my new jam, Savageland, the spiritual successor to Night of the Living Dead.
So, please don't knock over my heart, 'cause my heart is full of you. Yeah, my heart is full of you. And don't worry about tomorrow, 'cause my heart is full of you. Yeah, my heart is full of you.
Savageland is a 2015 faux documentary film released in 2017. Actually, I'm not completely positive of that. See, the end credits cite the fact that the movie was made in 2014, and yet everything I have been able to find online references 2015. See, this is what is interesting to me about this film. For as much as I've learned about it, there is still so much that I don't know. Like, usually this is the part where I would tell you at least the budget, let alone the returns made on that investment, but no information is readily available online. Though the returns aren't surprising to me as it was released VOD. It was written, directed, and produced by a trio of friends that met in UCLA Film School: Phil Goodry, Simon Herbert, and David Wayland. They decided rather than working on a spec to try to break into the industry, they would do something on their own. Savageland is presented, as I said, as a faux documentary or mockumentary, the cousin to the often overdone and underwhelming found footage style of horror movie. It revels in this style to bring us one of the most unique takes on a zombie attack that I have ever seen. Diary of the Dead aspires to be this movie. The quote-unquote found footage, which is used as the driving narrative in this film, isn't even actually film as we usually see. They're photographs from the night of the massacre in Sangre de Cristo, Arizona. I'll talk about that name later. On that night, 57 people were brutally slaughtered, including children. An illegal immigrant named Francisco Salazar is the only survivor and ultimately the sole suspect of the massacre. He's tried and convicted and sent to death row. And it's only after these pictures are found, and I'll come back to those later too, that any question about his innocence arises. Though not from the cops, or the courts, or the locals. Now, I'm going to pontificate for 1 second here. Lots of people seem to have an issue with the fact that there is no video footage from the night used in the film, only photographs. I disagree with that stance. I do not think that it cheapens or weakens it. I think that it is a strength in this film. One of my favorite movies growing up was Reservoir Dogs by Quentin Tarantino. It's a heist movie that occurs both before and after the heist itself. You don't need to see it because the concept of the film is in the perception of the events itself. Savageland is about perception of events from multiple angles. A picture's worth 1,000 words, and I would much rather have this picture chill my soul than see plenty of things I don't necessarily need to see. The fact that there are only pictures adds to the ambiguity of the night and gives plenty of fuel to the multiple stances that people take during the course of this movie. Oh, also, the actor that plays Francisco Salazar isn't actually even a professional actor, he's a photographer. Just throwing that out there. Oh yeah, also this guy created Wolverine. To capitalize on the realism, and undoubtedly due to budget constraints, they used little to no name actors, friends, and colleagues to help give this film its look. In the second act, when the attack on the town is discussed, there's a layout of the town itself that is used to show the path of destruction. This was only able to be done because Phil Gaudry knew an architect that could create that for them. They didn't have the means to shoot in a courtroom, but they were able to get someone to do a courtroom sketch for them. See, the realism of this film is honestly based on the multiple layers and creativity that these guys had to pull from in order to make something out of nothing. I cannot honestly say that I would have thought to use a courtroom sketch as opposed to using courtroom footage. They didn't even have any cameras of their own. They had to borrow them for each day of shooting. They never really knew what kind of camera they were going to be able to get, and obviously, they all gave the footage a different type of visual appearance. So rather than having an oddly thrown together visual mishmash, they shot certain scenes one day and others on the next. One particular day had a single actor walking through the town. It took about 20 takes to shoot this scene in the Arizona desert, with the heat rising well over 105 degrees. They had to work at a breakneck pace to do the entire scene in one day before the sun went down in order to capture everything that needed to be captured. Otherwise, they would have to turn the camera back in and may never get another opportunity to shoot this scene with the same look. That is dedication. That is art. The ability to make a film in general, let alone one that is actually cohesive and effective under such constraints, is no easy task. But they did it. Okay, so I've gushed about the making of this movie, given props to the guerrilla style that Phil, David, and Simon, I've decided that we're all on a first-name basis now, have accomplished. I've told you the general concept of the movie, but that's not completely why you're here, is it? You come to me for that tender intellectual massage. Well, get out some icy hot, because here we go. I called Savageland the spiritual successor to Night of the Living Dead, and I will stand by that statement. That is in no way to diminish the accomplishments or merits of Dawn or Day. But what I mean by my statement is that both Night of the Living Dead and Savageland are extremely political. Now, it is no secret or stretch that about 95% of all zombie movies are metaphorical, usually running with the idea of zombie as other. This movie does that, but it also does so much more. Alright, let's circle back to a few things here. The first being the irony of the name of the town itself, Sangre de Cristo, translating to the blood of Christ. Or, if you want to pull from Latin, the blood of God. Ironic name for a town where a massacre like this happens. But blood there is. And also, in a respect, we even have a Christ-like figure in Salazar. A man railroaded and killed for the sins of others. I mean, in this case, the others being the other, the zombie. But that's what we are able to perceive in this film. The narrative itself goes in a slightly different direction. Salazar is constantly referred to by his status as an illegal immigrant, let alone an illegal immigrant who has been living in this country for 7 years. On top of that, the residents in a neighboring town have no scruples in talking about the perception of Mexicans.
There's a lot more Salazars out there. More Riveras, more Sanchez's, more Carlos's. But make no mistake, it's a matter of when.
As a matter of fact, they generally speaking can't even pronounce the name of the town, hence the slang name for Sangre de Cristo, Savageland. See, this film plays fast and loose. Savageland being both the name that locals in a neighboring town give to this place because it's filled with illegal immigrants, but also because of the events that took place on that night. Remember, this film was made at the very latest in 2015. June 16th of that year was the date when Trump announced he was running for office with this opening remark.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
From that point on, he has been referencing build a wall. The idea of a wall was even discussed in this film.
The Great Wall of America between us and Mexico. I don't hear them trying to build that wall between here and Canada. And they're not saying some Canuck is coming down and killing people up in Michigan.
So to put to bed many of the comments that I've read while I was researching this movie, no. This movie does not have anything to do with any sort of bias against Trump himself. But what it does do is highlight an issue in America that existed already. the racist idea of an invasion force coming from below the border and the hatred of the other. You even have a Rush Limbaugh analogy in this talk show, spitting hatred and vitriol. If you look at the United States and think that this sort of mentality is something that has only reared its ugly head since 2016, you are dead wrong. It's gotten louder, sure, but it has always been there. But you didn't think the left would get off so easy, did you? Lawrence Ross, who by the way plays himself, is supposedly the one who finds Salazar's pictures.
The truth is that I'm the one who found the photos. I'm the one who released them.
They're deemed inadmissible in court, and Lawrence holds them up as a commentary on racism and injustice in America. Although he does have a point, he is also kind of part of the problem, because just like so many other people who fight, argue, and rage against the machine, he finds himself not able to see the bigger picture.
Ross found the truth, but he couldn't see it. He got scared. I don't blame him.
Yes, potentially those pictures do exonerate Francisco Salazar, as does the mountains of other incidental evidence. The question still remains though, if he didn't do it, then who did? And these pictures show something horrifying and disturbing at play here. So while justice and exoneration of a wrongfully convicted man should be a factor here, the arguably larger factor should be the contents of the pictures themselves. Hatred and bigotry, sanctimoniousness and pride, two sides of the same coin. And the political angle isn't the only factor at play here either.
We do take an eye for an eye, because not only is that fair, that's our God-given right.
People do not get as upset about hypocrisy as they should. There's a very quick throwaway remark made by our narrator in the course of the film about noticing different types of dead bodies lately, but nobody has been talking about it. Maybe that's what gave him the urge to start looking for justice and starting this crusade about the truth of that night. So we have a potential cover-up angle here as well. This movie has so many different directions that it can go in and so much weight in its subject matter, but it chooses to do something interesting that very few documentaries do. Something that I love doing on this channel as well, honestly. It starts a conversation with no intention of finishing it. Yes, it does point out how improbable and frankly, almost impossible it would be for Francisco to commit all of these murders himself, but it does not attempt to completely absolve him here. It shows and hints at what might have happened to the town, but the word zombie is never even expressly used. And to be honest with you, seeing as though Mexico gave us wreck, I'm not even positive that these are actually zombies. Though most of the evidence points that way, and this is a zombie series, so we're just going to assume that they are for the purposes of this video. So with two sides arguing about what actually happened and using this poor man as a cudgel to beat their own agendas into our heads, where does that leave us? Scared. And you know what? It should.
There's only three possibilities. Either he's lying, he's crazy, or he's telling the truth.
One side wants somebody to blame, so why not the illegal immigrant? They shouldn't be here anyway, right? The other side rages against them and does nothing but argue for the defense of the illegal immigrant. But neither side see the big picture here, and nobody on either side pays attention to patterns when they are right in front of their faces.
7 weeks after Salazar's execution, the mutilated remains of 2 campers were found in the Tonto National Forest, 115 miles north of Sangre de Cristo.
What I'm getting at is that minds get made up, and conversations and new evidence don't always mean anything. I'm talking about tribal mentality here. Francisco Salazar was sentenced to death because he was an illegal Mexican and it was convenient. The rest didn't matter. If somebody has dug their heels in about an idea or a position on something, sometimes even while being presented evidence that supports the direction contrary to what they believe, they simply will not change their minds. Conclusions are made out of prejudice. Right questions forget to be asked when faced with your own agenda.
California, keep your eyes wide open to what's really going on, y'all. Things ain't always what they seem. Things ain't always what they seem.
Guys, always remember, keep an open mind. Sometimes a perfect picture isn't so perfect. Sometimes there is room for doubt. And sometimes just sometimes, your sin will find you out.
Things ain't always what they seem. Things ain't always what they seem. Here's a reality check from the streets of California. Keep your eyes wide open to what's really going on, y'all. Things ain't always what they seem. Things ain't always what they seem. Here's a reality check from the streets of California. Keep your eyes wide open to what's really going on, y'all. Things ain't always what they seem. Things ain't always what they seem. Here's a reality check from the streets of California. Keep your eyes wide open to what's really going on.